Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial video for the Advanced Spawn Manager. In the video we're going to be covering the Placement Manager, which is a feature only available in the Pro version of the Advanced Spawn Manager. Okay, so I'm just going to go over a few things of this first. We already covered the different types of spawn areas you can have in the previous video. So we can have spheres, or we can have boxes, or we can have nothing whatsoever, which is just a transform. And they're the basics that you need. If you just start placing these spawn areas around, you should be able to get by. But I'm going to show you something else first, which is the no repeat interval. So let me first grab this here and show you an example of where it can be used. So let's pause this, and I'm going to move this up into this tower here, as though we're going to spawn on archers in this area. Doesn't need to be perfect. I'm just going to get it roughly in place. There we go. Okay, and back to my scene view. So we can see here we're spawning enemies in this little tower. But for your gameplay, maybe it's a little bit difficult, and you don't want to spawn too many enemies up here because, well, if you have to take a difficult shot or something, that's going to be too frustrating. So what you can do is you can set a no repeat interval on this particular spawn area. And what this means is, so for now I'm going to put 5 seconds, and what this means is that once you do spawn an enemy here, wait at least 5 seconds before you spawn another one. So if you look here, we're still spawning lots of enemies, but up here we're spawning far fewer. So like I say, this is quite useful for difficult spawn areas you don't spawn enemies in too often. Okay, I'm going to show you something else here, which is a way of spawning between these areas, and that is the cycle type. So what this basically is determines how you're spawning between these areas, and in this particular case we're going to spawn in area 1, which is our sphere, then in area 2, then in area 3. So you'd see this sort of pattern, and they'll always spawn in this pattern right now. I'm going to go ahead and turn off no repeat interval here, so it's more obvious to see the pattern. So one here, one here, one here, and it just keep going around in that loop. However, you can change that, and we can make it say spawn randomly per object as well, and instead of just doing that same pattern, you'll see they'll just randomly jump between each one, which can be pretty useful. Okay, the other ones here, as you've most likely seen, is spawn randomly per wave and spawn sequentially per wave. These should be pretty self-explanatory. It's basically, if you're spawn like this and you have an entire wave, the entire wave will spawn in one zone, or the next zone and the next zone, instead of each individual enemy. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sequentially per object so we can see what's going on. And one other thing I want to cover is spawn spheres, because these have a little bit extra functionality to the other collider types. I'm going to cover that a little bit now. So what we can see here is spawn on flat edges, and if you look on what's going on, I'm going to turn up this radius so it's more obvious. Actually, I'm going to put a repeat interval here just to stop the other areas from spawning. So what you can see here is the enemies are only spawning on the edge of a 2D circle, which luckily in Unity is actually quite easy to see. It's this circle here. I'm just going to pull it down so we don't jump as much. We can see them now spawning nicely on the floor. Okay, but the other features that we have are you can spawn within an area, on edge, or within flat sphere instead. And it's pretty important to know what these do, because if you choose the wrong one, you can have some pretty bad effects. So I'll show you an example now, which is within area. What this is doing is it's spawning anywhere in this circle. So as you can see, like sometimes you get them spawning in mid-air, and they're going to drop down on top of each other. But what's really bad about this, if you don't implement this properly, is that you can spawn underground. So it's pretty important to make sure you've got the right spawning type when you're using spheres. Otherwise you're going to see stuff like this. The ones I recommend are within flat sphere or on flat edges. The other two are for if you're spawning within entire zones, so it could be say for particles or for a space-based spawning environment where you can spawn in all 3 dimensions. But for most games with any sort of flat land, you're going to want the flat types for your spheres here. Okay, that's basically it. However, I want to cover one final note, which is pretty important about this no repeat intervals. So we see here we've got no repeat intervals is 200. But if we also stick one on here, we're going to see some errors appearing. This is basically because you're going to spawn an enemy in each zone, and the placement manager is then going to realize I actually can't spawn anywhere because I'm told not to for at least 5 seconds. So basically just keep this in mind and try and ensure that your no repeat interval takes into consideration your spawn time. So I'll give you an example. In this case, in this wave, we're spawning every half a second, and we have 3 zones. So what it means is that it's going to take 1.5 seconds if we're spawning sequentially to get back to this spot here. So we need a minimum of a maximum of 1.5 second no repeat interval here to avoid this error from occurring. So I'm going to set a no repeat interval for a second to be safe and clear it. I know it's still not working, and that's because the other two have an interval, so let me delete them. And there we go, the error is gone. Okay, that covers this tutorial. Thanks for watching.